The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. Okay, so we're here with the first Q&A on the Montessori Education Podcast. So I'm going to just hop right in with the questions right off the bat here. And then at the end, we'll go into what future episodes will look like and all that. So number one, and this is from a few parents and teachers. Is Montessori for every child? So I get this, I've had this often through the years. And my answer at this point is yes, almost. So first I'll handle the yes. So I think this question, from what I've seen, comes from parents or teachers that are concerned about their child or children that they've seen. And a few examples over the years for me that have been kind of most prevalent and I've seen turnarounds. I'll just start with the first one is, like, let's say your child is the type who just runs all over the place, seems kind of like high energy, crazy type. So you walk into a Montessori classroom and you're like, whoa, I mean, it's so calm. And you're thinking, my child will never fit in this classroom. He's just too crazy. And I've seen this so many times over the years. Like, I've seen kids literally walk into a classroom and just start throwing everything off the shelves, like just taking their hand and dragging it across the shelves. Now, when I first started, I might think to myself, oh, this kid's never going to make it. Now, over the years, I've seen the turnaround sometimes incredibly quickly, like literally 2-3 days later. Sometimes it takes 2-3 months. But the reality is, from my experience and from everything I've heard and read, these are easily changed aroundable, if I could put it like that. So Montessori is for children who, quote, have high energy or are kind of wild. Will work for them. And then maybe you've got a child who's seemingly super timid. So I'm shy. I don't know if I can touch any of this stuff. So you might have a child who comes in and it's just, they're tiptoeing around. They don't want to bother anybody. They don't want to touch any of the materials. So you might have a child with that type of personality and you think to yourself, whoa, my child's 3 and there's some 5.5-year-olds in this classroom. She'll never make it. Or he's going to be scared while he's in here. So I've seen that over the years, so many of those type of children. And yes, it can seem, the Montessori environment can get a little hectic at times. A lot of kids, there's 20, 30 kids at times, and toddler might be, 6, 12, who knows? It's a lot going on. So it might be like, oh, if my child is timid or seemingly timid, they're not going to make it here. Again, over time, that changes. And that's one of the things with Montessori, even whether your child's running around crazy, a lot of energy, or, seemingly super, very timid and calm. The whole idea is the Montessori classroom actually helps a child to develop his personality or her personality. And it's kind of like, who do you want to become? Now, do you want to be that crazy kid that goes over your friend's house at 20 years old and just starts throwing stuff around the apartment? Do you want to be that adult who is shy to meet anybody and I'm kind of always scared around others? Or do you want to develop yourself to be a well-rounded individual that can handle all sorts of situations? So the Montessori environment actually aids children to turn around some of these seemingly like ingrained personality traits that you might find in your child or teachers might find in other children. Okay. And that doesn't mean that they're all going to kind of turn out to this one robotic type of Montessori child. Every child's going to develop his or her own unique personality, but there's so much that can be done in the classroom, and your child doesn't have to be, quote, a Montessori child walking into it. Then there's other children. Like the one that comes to mind for me is, a sensitive child, what people will say is super sensitive. Somebody who might come in the classroom and just start bawling all day long. And I actually wrote the introduction to the book, which will be coming out at some point. The introduction is free. It's online. You can go to montessorieducation.com and just click on the book. And I tell this whole story about a, quote, sensitive child that I saw, the crying boy, as I name him. All right. And then the question that comes up, it's more rare, and it's from kind of like academics often, is like, well, what about children with special needs or something like that? Or you might be a parent that has a child that you think has special needs. So I would say Montessori is incredible for children with, behavioral differences or learning or physical differences. For instance, my Montessori mentor and friend, Sylvia Dubovoy, out in San Diego, California, she actually has a full course called Inclusive Education that deals with these things. And we're not talking inclusive here, not about race or sexual orientation, none of that. This is more about not prejudging what children are capable of based on our own potential preconceived ideas about, oh, this children can do this, he can't do that. Montessori herself actually began with very, quote, like abnormal children, what they would literally call deficients back in the day. And this is basically children with learning issues. And if you know about Montessori history, phenomenally, she and others worked with children that were, again, abnormal. They were below normal. And she was able to raise them to the level of normal children in her day. So, just think what the different types of children that you could bring into this environment and see blossom. And I've seen this over the years with children on all sorts of different behavioral needs really blossom. A great example of this, incidentally, historically, is Helen Keller. Now, she wasn't literally in a Montessori classroom, but she was a huge fan and supporter of the Montessori method, along with her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan actually said this about Helen Keller, quote, "What she has accomplished without sight and hearing suggests the forces that lie dormant in every human being." Okay. And Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan basically viewed their method of learning similar to what the Montessori method of learning. So there's all sorts of possibilities in a Montessori environment for children with different, needs, whether kind of normal spectrum needs or off the spectrum needs. So again, yes, I believe Montessori is for every child. But then, I've got this caveat, which is the almost. So there's a few things. One, although very rare in my experience with great Montessori schools, children are sometimes asked to leave by necessity. So over the years for me, that's about 15 years, I have seen only 5 or so children asked to leave at schools I've worked with, or, a couple that I asked to leave over that time period. So that's an average of about, I'd say, 1 every 3 years. And 2 of those, just thinking off the top of my head, were not because of the child. They were for other reasons, the school involved. So the average is really, in my experience, about 1 every 5 years. Now, these were mainly because of aggression. Definitely special needs, but the aggression just became truly unmanageable in the classroom and made the environment unsafe for everyone. And that is when children are asked to leave, that is often the case. So, I would say most of this depends on the level of teachers a school has. Like, for instance, how prepared are they to handle a child with special needs? Now, there are schools that no doubt ask children to leave like every year, but they might be newer schools that can't yet handle the extra work involved, or they might not have veteran teachers who know what to do. It's not easy, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is some children will literally need extra assistance. So the normal Montessori classroom won't be enough for them. Again, this is very, very rare, but I've seen it happen. So this is, you would think of like such as, kind of personal aid in the classroom, at least in the beginning. So Montessori classrooms are not set up with this idea of adding another adult, particularly because somebody has to pay for that adult on top of the fact that you're trying to have fewer adults in the classroom. So it's just something to think about if you do have a child with special needs. If the needs are that large that you need an extra assistant, that's still possible. But I wouldn't say that the Montessori school that you might attend is going to finance that. If they had to, I think we'd have a lot more schools going bankrupt today than some of them already are. Okay, and then I'd say the third thing on the end of the almost, my caveat is that, and this is probably most importantly, I don't know it all. And I definitely haven't seen it all. So no doubt there are cases that I have not encountered myself where children, for whatever reason, just don't fit into a genuine Montessori classroom. So I just want to throw that out there because I don't know everything. That should go without saying. But okay, that's enough on that question. Second question, and this has come up from a few parents. how do I best introduce Montessori materials to children at home, or basically my child at home? So first, let me say that around preschool age, so 3 or so, I'm all about trying to find a great Montessori school for your child. So if possible, not teaching him or her at home yourself. I mean, being a full-time mom or dad up until that age is enough work for a lifetime, right? So adding on the job of Montessori teacher is a lot. And I mean, more importantly, related to this, being around someone all day, every day for that long can be very tough on a child and on a parent. I mean, even if it doesn't seem that way. So there's this classic line, I don't know if you've heard it out there, but it's familiarity breeds contempt. Now, I don't actually think this is a true statement as such, as there are parents who make being a parent and a teacher work, but I don't think it's ideal. But let's say there's no school near you, so you're thinking of just staying at home and teaching. Then I suggest finding a few families nearby who would like to do a co-op and having someone other than a parent be the teacher. This might seem like a lot of work and kind of, I don't know if it'd be hippie or I don't know how you view this, but I've seen parents of every walk of life do this, from those making less than $30,000 a year to those making well over $300,000. So finances aren't really the block here. I think it's doing the work of finding people in a similar situation. And I'm probably going to take a lot of pushback for some of what I'm saying here, and that's okay with me. It's one of the awesome things about being a human. We can agree on some things and then disagree on others, and without going berserk about it. So with that kind of out of the way, that I would recommend not being the parent and the teacher. How do you present materials or really introduce any new activity to your child? Now, there are tons of resources online about how to teach this or that specific material. I suggest you find a few materials that appeal to you and that you think your child might be, developmentally ready for and excited about. And then find a few Montessori blog sites that appeal to you that have specific guidance on them. Now, I'd tell you exact sites, but quite honestly, I haven't delved into enough of them to give you my quote favorite. And I personally can't stand ads on blogs, so I tend to stay off most of them. But I know there are good ones out there with solid info, on that kind of step-by-step how to, introduce this particular material. So go at it and find those. Now, when I'm working with parents one-on-one, I go into step-by-step aid with certain materials and activities. For instance, a big one is preparing food so kids actually love to eat it. So we go through steps there, but I just can't do that on this quick, podcast Q&A episode. So what I'm going to do is just give some general guidance on how to approach, any material activity you present. This is big picture principle type stuff. So first I would, this is just with everything, ensure the new material is fitting to your child's developmental level. So, think not too easy for her to do alone with zero guidance, but not too hard that she'll need your, continued aid after you demonstrate how it works. So next, I would model how to do the material activity. So don't talk about how to do it, model it. And then this is with slow, clear movements and with only the words necessary to demonstrate it. I mean, it's kind of like if you were teaching a child how to ride a bike and you just hopped on and sped off at full speed. It's like the child can't see the separate little things that go into that. So you want to really slowly present anything you're doing. Now, after you present it, then you're going to step back and ask your child if she or he would like to try. So you don't go, now it's your turn. It's kind of like, oh, would you like to try? Now, if she doesn't, that's no biggie, try again another day. Side note, when they start working on the material, do not correct. So if your child gets something wrong along the way, fine, let it go. Then later, maybe that day or the next day, you can demonstrate the whole activity again yourself. Your child will eventually self-correct. So it's kind of like, don't say to your infant, who's working with the shape puzzle, no, sweetie, the square goes here. Something like that. Don't do that. Sweetie's not going to like that. It's never fun to have someone over your shoulder telling you what you're doing wrong. Okay? It doesn't matter what age you are. And the point here is that when done right, children feel like they're actually teaching themselves, so that you're not the one doing it all. And in many ways, they really are teaching themselves if you follow this type of method on introducing materials. Okay, that's kind of actually a good segue into the third question. And this is from a parent. I've also heard this numerous times, but a parent wrote this in. So why does my child's teacher keep calling herself a guide? So instead of teacher, guide. Now, personally, I alternate between the two, so teacher and guide. But I do think there's a good reason why many are trying to get the term guide into common practice. I mean, like a teacher teaches. So in the old days, and still in most schools today, teaching basically means children sit in rows of chairs with an adult lecturing at them. So many of us have this ingrained in our minds as what a teacher does. So getting rid of that image connected with Montessori, I think, is a good thing. But deeper than that, Montessori is an approach to education that says knowledge cannot be given to anybody. Like it must be earned through one's own efforts and mind. So I think guide is a fitting term because it basically says we're here to guide you towards self-learning, as opposed to the traditional idea of teaching you knowledge or skills. I'm giving you this knowledge. I'm giving you these skills because I know so much. So guide is more like a coach. He can tell you about how to swing the racket, in tennis and so forth, but ultimately it's his modeling how to do it well, and then you're practicing it for yourself with a lot of trial and error. That's going to do the job. So I like the idea of guide better than a teacher, and it's got some deep significance. But with that said, I still call myself a teacher and guide interchangeably, and I really don't like the idea that Montessori guides somehow don't teach. I'm talking actual content. So I think content is so important. So no matter how, brilliant a child supposedly is, knowledge is very often transmitted from one knowledgeable human being, let's say a teacher, to another human being who might be lacking in that knowledge. So a student, right? It's not dropped in his head, but one person has to teach something that they know to another human being. And often that's in the form of an explicit lesson or lecture when a child is older. So I'm just adding this all to say that a teacher does not necessarily have to be a dirty word. I think it's more of what we mean behind the terms we're using. So somebody could say teacher and have such a profound and deep understanding of what it means to work with a child, and somebody could be using teacher. And then somebody could be using guide and really be just bossing children around in the classroom. So I think it's more about seeing what people mean by the word, both in their words and then what they do in practice. There's actually a passage from Montessori that I love about the need to actually teach content to children. I'm going to share it with you. So her biographer, the late E.M. Standing, shares how she once was taken to a school in France, Montessori, where they were supposed to be carrying out her principles. This is what Montessori said, quote, "We came to one room. It was the science room. Not a soul was there except the master, nor for that matter had been for several days. When I inquired into his method of teaching, the master airily replied that he did not teach, the children discovered. It appears he had placed a mysterious white mixture on the laboratory bench, and the children were supposed to ascertain the various substances it contained by discovery. Considering," continued Montessori with a wry smile as she related this almost incredible story, quote, "considering how few real discoveries are made by trained scientists in a lifetime, it was, to say the least, strange to expect inexperienced children without knowledge, without method, without stimulus, and therefore without interest to make perpetual discoveries from day to day. No wonder the room was empty." So I love this. I love this because it gets into the real core of how important content is. And it also gets, Montessori's humor there as well. So ultimately, it's not about a label of teacher or guide or master or whatever. It's about what one's actually doing with children again. So now as a final note on this, I'd say that Maria Montessori usually used the word teacher from what I can tell in her writings and talks, but she also definitely used guide and a lot, mainly as a verb, as in, we're guiding children in their learning or this or that. But I also have an explicit reference to teachers as guides with Montessori that I really like. It's from her book, The Montessori Method. Quote, "We are the guides of these travelers just entering the great world of human thought." End of quote. So I really like that. All right. So those are the listeners' questions for this time and my answers as well. Now, what am I going to do here? Oh, some quick info on what to expect for future episodes, including at least one of the questions I'll be answering next time, which I'm excited about. So first, the timing of these episodes. I will put out a Q&A episode like this. I'm hoping to get them down to about 15 minutes in length, so I got to quit my gibbering. And around the 15th of every month. I'll continue to put out a longer interview podcast episode, same as always, and now right about the 25th of the month. So the Montessori Education Podcast will have 2 episodes a month. One, a full-length interview, and then the other, a shorter Q&A like this one. Okay, how to send in your questions so that they can actually get on the show. I definitely can't promise they'll get on because I get a lot of questions. So I'm just trying to find ones that appeal to numerous people or have been asked numerous times. But send them in, we'll see what happens. So most questions I get are sent directly to me. That's Jesse, Jesse, at MontessoriEducation.com. But feel free to add questions anywhere I'll be able to find them. So on the podcast page of the site, again, at MontessoriEducation.com, or social media like Facebook and Instagram. Also on YouTube, where the podcast episodes will be shared as well. As always, ratings and reviews, please rate the show. Even if it's just writing, great podcast and hitting the full stars. I get a lot of awesome emails saying how much people love the show. Throw it on some site that you listen to the podcast as well. So don't just email it to me, although I love it. So please keep emailing me with those positive comments, but also write a review. The show has been increasing in listeners each month. So thank you guys so much for those of you who listen and enjoy. I just love to see it reaching even further, and these ratings and reviews really help with that. Okay, and the last thing, the next Q&A session will have one question for sure that I'll answer, and that is from a teacher or a guide, whatever you prefer. It's this, quote, "Do you ever get mad at your students? I'm always trying to control myself, but sometimes it's like I just can't keep it together. How do you deal with emotions and overall stress?" That is a fun one, and I am definitely excited to hop into that next time. So that is it. Thank you again to everyone out there, and I will talk with you soon.